From Newzroom Afrika studios in Johannesburg, welcome to This Week in Politics. My name is Vuyo Mvoko. Thank you for watching. Almost a dozen national directors of public prosecution in 27 years, with not a single one of them ever finishing their term. Shamila Batohi's de facto exit interview this week gave very little hope that any successor will get anything right anytime soon. We bring you highlights of her grilling by members of parliament, including her admission that organized criminals are taking over the country and that people like her are powerless to do anything about it.
With this policy statement, we have reason to be optimistic about the future of our country.
Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's medium-term policy budget statement enjoys a smooth ride through Parliament, but does the drama-free passage this time around signal that the GNU partners have not only found one another, but could well be on their way to finding solutions to the country's economic growth and unemployment problems? And while many of you may have been glued to what's been happening in Parliament and at the commissions of inquiry, some seemingly small but profound things have been happening in the country's leading political parties, the ANC, the DA, and the MK party. All that and more to the G20 in today's edition of This Week in Politics. In the 27 years of the National Prosecuting Authority's existence, not one national director ever served a full 10-year term. Some resigned, others were abruptly removed, often amid political controversies and legal challenges. The founding national director, Bulelani Ngcuka, served for 6 years and left before his term expired, amidst a public spat with the ANC and the then public protector, Lawrence Mushwana, over the NPA head's view that there was a prima facie case of corruption against Jacob Zuma. Deputy National Director Silas Ramaite would warm the seat for some months before Vusi Pikoli was appointed, only for Pikoli to leave in a huff 2.5 years later, following his suspension by then-President Thabo Mbeki over an irretrievable breakdown of his relationship with the Minister of Justice at the time. Mokotedi Mche acted for 2 years before Menzi Simelane got the job, but was later dismissed after the Constitutional Court declared his appointment by President Zuma invalid. Nomgcobo Jiba took charge for a bit until Mxolisi Nxasana got the nod. But Nxasana left in a half 19 months later, after then-President Jacob Zuma agreed to an inquiry to look into his fitness to hold office. The matter was later settled out of court, and Nxasana received a 17.3 million rands golden handshake. Ramaite was back in his acting capacity for a month before Sean Abrams got the nod this time. 3 years later, Abrams supposedly retired, but not before the Constitutional Court found his appointment too was unconstitutional. Ramaite's acting skills became useful once again, until incumbent Shamila Batohi was brought in from the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Ostensibly brought in to rebuild the NPA and pursue state capture cases, 6 years into the position, and now with only a couple of months left of her shorter tenure, public confidence in the NPA hasn't been restored. In fact, some argue it has been further eroded. This week, her appearance before the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee that's looking into alleged corruption leadership failures and political interference in the criminal justice system did resemble an exit interview. Admittedly, though, she was in front of a multi-party committee whose members can be quite partisan in positions they take or how they treat people who come before them. But she did very little to keep even those otherwise sympathetic to her on her side.
What you need most importantly is you need competent, experienced and confident prosecutors who are able to confidently take cases to court in the face of strong opposition of defence counsel, who have no such restraints and currently have a free ride. Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree with that, but I want to add to that I agree with everything that the Honourable Breitenbach has said with regard to capacities, capabilities that's needed to deal with these complex matters. We did a capability review in the NPA, and we found that we have extremely competent, skilled prosecutors who can prosecute, should I say, traditional crimes extremely well.
Yes.
But the reality is that with complexity of corruption, cybercrime, we do lack the skills. And that's one of the reasons why we have also been employing the use of Section 38 Counsel to fill the gap that we have precisely for that, whilst we try to build capacity and capability in these fields within the NPA. And there's a lot of initiatives that are happening to deal precisely with that.
But not everyone was as kind as Glynis Breitenbach, her former colleague at the NPA. And as frustrations grew, tempers fled and accusations flew, with a number of committee members making no secret of their unhappiness with both how she answered their questions and her performance as the NPA head.
She was suggesting we must just go home if she's going to proceed like that. Because we deal with names here. What are we dealing with? What are we dealing with here? We want to know who captured the criminal justice system. And if we can't be told names and we accept that, let's go home. Especially names that are out there. There is a prosecutor, I'm just forgetting the name of, is it Johannesburg or something, Pretoria, who's suspended by the president? Joburg, Chauke. What's difficult saying something like that? What's difficult saying something like that? If we're referring to Chauke, or if there is more, we need to know. There is nothing unprofessional about that, because if we're going to proceed like that, we're becoming toothless.
I beg your pardon?
Why have you not acted on Phalaphala?
Because there are processes to be followed in the legal process. The DPP takes a decision on the matter or not. And of course, anybody is entitled to ask that the National Director review this matter. That review process is not kicked in, but I'm trying to get clarity on whether Honourable Malema might be correct, whether the DPP in fact took a decision in this matter, and whether there is a review process in the SCCU head office. But I want to get clarity on that. But for now, to be clear through you, Chair, the matter is not on my desk. I have never considered this matter or the merits of this matter.
So the ethical leader in you doesn't say do something about Phalaphala. Anyway.
There are processes at the moment that are happening. The matter is at the head office.
The ethical leader in you.
That's correct. There are processes and the matter is at the SCCU in the head office.
I made a plea and I even said to you, even if I meet you in town, in the toilet, everywhere, I will request you to resign, because in my understanding, you are not fit for this position. Now, Section 34 of the NPA says the NDPP may direct a DPP to submit a report to him regarding a specific activity relating to his or her powers, duties, and functions. That is the first section that gives you huge powers to run the institution holistically. Section 22 says the NDPP may direct a DPP to submit a report in respect of any case, matter, prosecution Now, when it says prosecution, it gives you a responsibility to summon a report, even if the prosecution is still underway, to say, NTPP, come to my office or give me a report about this matter and advise or overturn, as you said, that you can overturn the decision of the NTPP. But in many instances, you refer a responsibility to the DPP and says, no, it falls in his competency and you have no statutory responsibility.
Now, all manner of explanations have been offered for the NPA's failures, from resource constraints to lack of political will, leadership failures to downright incompetence. President Cyril Ramaphosa recently appointed a panel to find a new NDPP, to be chaired by his Justice Minister Mamloko Kubai, and comprising of people drawn from commissions and legal organizations. Its selection process, according to the president, is going to be rigorous, open, and transparent. But will they find the person who will succeed, where Batohi reluctantly admits she and others failed?
Crime is ravaging our country. And it seems like we are watching this movie in front of us in slow motion, and those of us in power that should be doing something about it are powerless to do anything about it. That the criminals are taking over our country, organized criminals. As the national director, the one thing that I do is authorize racketeering prosecutions. And the numbers of racketeering prosecutions don't give any confidence that we are, and the types as well, that we are dealing with the top level of organized criminality in this country. I want to hasten to add that there are some good cases, and there are good people within the system that are working really hard. So whatever I'm saying must be taken in that context. But when you start off to deal with crime, you have to have an efficient crime intelligence. That's the starting point. Then you have to have in the police, you have to have not just the numbers. You have General Lebeya, who has testified in Parliament that the Hawks are sitting at 50%. How can you fight crime, serious crime, when you have a 50% vacancy rate? If you have to deal with high-level organized crime and corruption, you need financial capabilities to investigate this. I stand to be corrected, but if I'm not mistaken, General Lebeya at one point said that the Hawks had 2 chartered accountants. 2.
Well, if the National Director of Public Prosecutions says what she said there, many South Africans will indeed have to be persuaded to be optimistic. But if you think Shamila Batohi had it rough this week in front of the country's legislators, you obviously didn't see what subsequently happened to suspended Police Minister Senzo Mchunu's Chief of Staff, Cedric Gabinde. For a while, as he was going through his statement, he seemed to be cruising, even charming his way into the hearts and minds of the members of the ad hoc committee.
I wrote it deliberately like this because it was personal stuff of General Mkhwanazi, where I was accompanied. General Mkhwanazi was a very close friend of mine. I think it's safe to say it was a boys' trip. Safe to say like that. Otherwise, me and him will get into trouble. Because I believe his wife and my wife are watching here. So I don't want to tell much.
So you can't tell us much more, is it personal?
Yeah, no, it was very personal. Things that we do with him are sometimes very personal.
So wasn't Minister Mchunu curious that the two of you're on a boys' trip? What are you doing coming to visit him?
He did not even ask, what are you doing here? He did not even know we were in Pangen for what.
What describe to us your relationship with Lieutenant General Konazi. It seems to be... I can't hear.
Honorable members, a boy's trip is a boy's trip. Yes. So let's keep it straight and simple. That is what Mr. Gabinde is saying, that let's just keep it straight and simple. May we proceed as...
It wasn't long before wheels came off. Contradictions swirled, and his testimony started falling apart to the annoyance of the legislators.
You know, colleagues, a man sits in front of you and say, I was thumb-sucking this affidavit. He used that word. And then you still, if you take yourself serious, want to go on with an affidavit of being thumb-sucked. He said it. I've thumb-sucked this thing. October, November, and also, Chair, I want to put it on record, he's lying. October, November, it's a correct date because that minister went to the mine on the 14th of November. Not in July, on the 14th of November. And then now he says, no, October, November, he's caught in a lie. He changes to be prior, the call of Mkhwanazi. It's a lie. It's perjury, it's a lie. He needs to be arrested for lying to Parliament, lying under oath.
Mr. Gabinde, jy mors ons tyd hier vandag. You're really wasting our time. I want to ask you, are you the only person in that department that has access to dates? Does the minister not have a PA? No other support staff you could have verified these dates with? That's the one thing. Secondly, you've given us a sworn statement. You have sworn this morning. You now come and you say you have thumb-sucked dates. You have a guided statement, and your dates are based on what previous witnesses have said. Are we really meant to probe further on a statement that is not truthful, on a statement that won't guide us to a means to an end? Because that's why we're here. We need to connect the dots. And when you're sitting there telling us, I don't know, it could have been 2 months prior, it could have been 2 months earlier, that is not even close. Are we meant to sit here today and even probe you with as to when things happened when you've given us a written statement? I don't think we should continue with you today.
If what we're being told here is anything to go by, it means the whole statement is misleading. So the committee can't rely on a misleading statement. And two, even if the statement was written by the evidence leader, they gave you to read the statement. They made you to confirm the content of the statement. And you signed the statement, unless you are telling us that you signed it ad duress. If you are saying to us they made you to sign forcefully, then we can understand. But if they made you to read the statement and allowed you to sign it before the statement was commissioned, then it means the problem is with you. I think, Chair, the only option we have here, because we can't rely on a misleading statement. This is a misleading statement because he says he is not sure of the dates that he has written here. And the statement is reflective of dates from the first to the last paragraph. So there is no need for us to have this interview unless we are saying we have appetite of engaging in a talk show.
Committee members were unanimous that proceedings should be halted, and halted they were. The minister's chief of staff was sent packing. The EFF has since laid perjury charges against Gabinde. You're watching This Week in Politics on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. Showing unity of purpose while grilling the police minister's chief of staff wasn't the only time parliamentarians showed a degree of cohesion this past week. You may remember scenes from February when the finance minister tried to table the budget. Twice it was rejected by those the finance minister sat with in cabinet. They walked out in protest, resulting in numerous delays in its passing. Well, not this week. There was no drama on Wednesday when Enoch Godongwana tabled what is often referred to as the mini budget. In fact, there was nothing mini about the pronouncements during his medium-term budget policy statement. Some were in fact big, from confirming a new 3% inflation target from the previous 3 to 6%, to revealing a tax overrun of 19 billion rands, the issuing of infrastructure bonds, all with no VAT increase on the cards.
When we collect money, we don't collect money to. It's not something you're going to keep it like a bank. When we collect money, we collect it to use for the betterment of our people. We do a balance. You can't pay debt only. You've got to pay some debt. You've got to meet some problems our people face on the ground. But always maintain a balance between these two.
That's not to say there was no criticism of Mr. Godongwana's budget statement.
What you call it, the targets, it was 2 to 4%, and also the GDP, which is a growth of 1%. It's actually a shame to our South African people. The fact that the minister failed to mention what is 4 things that are important in our country: the unemployment, poverty, inequality, and also the issue that is so important, the issue of land reform. It's actually what was going to assist the country. It tells you that they don't care. They just come here and during this time of the year, it was supposed to be a midterm budget policy.
A couple of things to point out here is we are now embedding a culture of spending reviews, meaning with each budget cycle, we'll also be announcing which programs are no longer efficient and should be wound down over time. Likewise, what we've been able to get right in this policy statement is that we're getting our debt under control, which means our debt servicing cost, or interest, as most people understand it, goes down, and then we're able to spend more on the things that we do need, such as hospitals and infrastructure and doctors and teachers and nurses. And what we also saw being announced today is an inflation target of 3% with a 1% band, which should be able to start chipping away at the cost of living crisis. The one other thing I want to point out is I'm told that the Minister of Finance was asked point blank earlier today if VAT is an option, and he used the words VAT is off the table. So some very promising indicators.
There's a couple of things that I think are good out of this announcement. Firstly, we've struggled to bring our debt service costs under control for the longest time. That's a good thing. Spending over 420 billion on interest on debt isn't good for a country that has got the kind of challenges that we have. That's beginning to come under control. SARS is able to collect more money, so much in fact that it's possible that in February, households and small businesses will get some relief from some of the tax proposals that are in place right now. That is a good thing, for instance. But we'll also get a sense of how the economy is doing. I'm not happy with how the economy is doing. Economic growth is too low.
So, do Wednesday's events mean that the GNU partners have now not only found one another, but could well be on their way to finding solutions to the country's economic growth and unemployment problems? Well, writing ahead of Wednesday's parliamentary sitting, Duma Gubule, an economic development and transformation specialist, wasn't convinced. He joins us now for his reflections. Duma, thank you very much for joining us. You wrote ahead of that budget speech by the finance minister that the 3% inflation target means that interest rates will be higher for longer, which reduces the potential demand on spending power. Do you still stick to that?
Thank you, Vuyo. I think South Africans must understand that the forecast in the budget was that GDP would grow by 1.2% in 2025. What that means is that the population is growing at about 1.4% a year. That means we're going to have the third consecutive year of declining GDP per capita. By the end of 2025, we will have had our GDP per capita will be lower than it was in 2007. So that is 18 years of declining average living standards, and we're heading for 2 decades of declining living standards. So by definition, our major problem is this chronically low GDP growth for such a long period. So by definition, that means that there is not enough money in the economy. There is not enough demand in the economy. So that is what I'm saying, is that we have to do everything in our power, the National Treasury and the Reserve Bank, to increase demand in our economy. The Stats SA surveys show that there's inadequate companies, large industrial companies, say that there's excess capacity or inadequate demand for the things that they can produce. In plain language, the people abana mali, they have no money to buy the things that companies can produce. That is why they don't invest. That is why they don't hire people, because there's no money in circulation. So it is actually a very simple problem. So interest rates, this inflation target is not addressed. Why is the Reserve Bank independent of our national goals to create jobs and grow the economy? The unemployment stats came out, 42.5% unemployment rate, and 12.5 million South Africans do not have jobs. That is the immediate priority. The priority is not inflation. We don't have an inflation problem. Secondly, the reason why I oppose this inflation target is that, as you said, it means that interest rates will be higher for longer for no reason. We have real after inflation prime lending rate of 7.1%. What does that mean? It means it's one of the highest in the world. It suppresses consumption spending, potential demand, because it could be much lower. It suppresses investment spending by companies because they have to pay high interest rates, and they can't pay it in an economy that's not growing. So interest rates will remain higher for longer for no reason. The third reason why I'm opposed to this inflation target is that for the past 25 years that we've had this inflation targeting framework, we've never had a system where situation where there's excess demand, too much spending in the economy. Interest rates are only relevant when there's too much demand in the economy, and you can increase interest rates to reduce demand. For the past 25 years, we've had what is called supply-side shocks. You've had some variants of exchange rate depreciation, international oil prices, food prices. More recently, we had foot and mouth disease. You don't have to be an economist to know that keeping interest rates high or increasing interest rates will not address foot and mouth disease, which is the cause of the high meat prices in the most recent past. So interest rate is completely irrelevant to the type of inflation that we have. So I would argue that it is impossible. The 3.54% inflation that we have has got nothing to do with interest rates. It's just a fluke it's a fluke, it's an accident of history, and it's got nothing to do with the Reserve Bank monetary policy. So I believe that the Reserve Bank can't target supply-side inflation. There are many other things that we can do to target supply-side inflation. The government can control administered prices like Eskom price increases. The Reserve Bank can't do anything about that. So there are many specific issues that you can do to address the cost of living crisis that have got nothing to do with interest rates. And that is what we learned during the pandemic. Yeah.
But then, Duma, can we really blame the Reserve Bank? Because they are doing what they're doing in line with what is their mandate currently. Until and unless you change that, only then, can they do some of the things that you think they should be doing. Isn't that true?
Well, the first thing I would say is that since inflation has got nothing to do with demand, there was no need to increase interest rates. Whatever they do on the interest rate side is completely irrelevant. So I just feel that it's completely irrelevant. The central bank can target GDP growth and jobs much easier than it can target inflation. Inflation, supply side, should be left to other government departments, the Department of Agriculture, to address meat prices and foot and mouth disease. So these are not things that they can influence. So I think we have to have a complete rethink of our whole monetary policy framework, because from what I can see, Vuyo, they don't really know what they're doing. They were just increasing interest rates to be seen to be doing something in this, with rising prices due to the pandemic. Yeah. But what we've learned from the pandemic throughout the world is that these price rises had nothing to do with demand. In every single country in the world, they had exactly the same increase of, similar increases in prices that had nothing to do with extra spending in the economy.
Well, the Monetary Policy Committee is due to meet in a day's time. And a lot of people are, of course, anticipating a rate cut and a ratings upgrade even as well. What, in your view, should they consider or think about when they meet next week?
Well, we've had a shock to our economy in terms of the tariffs from the US. That's a big shock to the economy. It's about just under 1% of GDP. Then we've got a risk emerging in terms of the artificial intelligence bubble. There is a risk that, we've already had over the past week, the bursting of the bubble. It could continue to become a meltdown on Wall Street, which will require a whole rethink of monetary policy in the US and globally. So it could spill over to the real economy. So given those risks, the shock that we have to the tariffs and the risk of a major crash on Wall Street, I think there is scope for an aggressive interest rate increase, because when there's a shock to your economy, it's best practice, as is practice in every major economy, is that you have counter-cyclical monetary and fiscal policies, whereby now the central bank cuts rates aggressively to cushion us from these shocks from the external environment, and the Treasury also spends more money into the economy. So that is what we need, because the way it's going with the shocks that we're having, the Treasury, we will not meet the 1.2% GDP forecast of National Treasury. Their forecasts are notoriously wrong. They have been wrong every year for the past decade to those of us. They're over-optimistic, so we can't continue with the 1.2% GDP forecast. We should be heading towards 3%, 4% growth. That should be the priority of central bank and the National Treasury.
Well, the complaint, just to conclude this conversation, has been that whatever the Reserve Bank has, or Monetary Policy Committee has tried to do on the monetary policy side has not been sort of matched on the fiscal side. Now, we saw this week that the politicians seem to be finding one another, partners to the a government of national unity. And they have said previously that they need to agree on how to take the country forward, how to grow the economy, what are the things that need to be done, how to create employment as well. What, in your view, can the politicians do on their part to increase demand and subsequently grow the economy?
Well, we had a mini summit of the members of the government, of the 10 parties in the government of neoliberal unity, and they came up with 8 areas that require urgent attention. They are so detached from the reality of our economy. Those 8 areas didn't include the jobs crisis. So all it confirmed is that they support the failed macroeconomic policies of the ANC over the past 30 years. So we saw in Parliament today, other parties, the EFF, such as the EFF, they were raising pertinent, and even ANC MPs, criticizing the macroeconomic policies of this government, you know. And I just think that the only way to start creating jobs and growing this economy tomorrow is to tear up this defunct, failed macroeconomic policy framework and come up with new policies. You know, Vuyo, if you have failed for 16 and 17 years, doing the same thing over and over again, normal people try something different. That's the part I don't understand. These are politicians who want to be re-elected, but the way they're operating, it's like they don't want to get in power anymore. They want someone else to take over. That is the feeling I get from the ANC, the largest party in this government of neoliberal unity.
Duma Kubule, let me thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. After the break, intra-party politics and how they may affect the country's leading three political parties in the run-up to the next local government elections in just over a year's time. You're watching This Week in Politics. Welcome back. Thanks for watching This Week in Politics here on Newzroom Afrika Channel 405. After a period of speculation, DA leader John Steenhuisen this week reshuffled his mini-cabinet within the cabinet. While President Cyril Ramaphosa's office made the announcement, it was Steenhuisen who had the final say in booting American passport holder Dion George and bringing on Willem Ocamp, I should say, as the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment.
The Democratic Alliance entered the Government of National Unity in June 2024 with a very clear mission: to confront South Africa's most urgent challenges and to deliver tangible improvements in the lives of all of our citizens. The DA currently holds 12 positions within the National Executive. It is therefore imperative that those roles are occupied by the most capable individuals. Accordingly, I formally request that the President implement changes to the DA's representatives in the National Executive as mandated by the Federal Executive of the Democratic Alliance. The President has now done so. Mr. Willie Ocamp succeeds Dr. Dion George as the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, and Ms. Alexandra Abrahams has filled the vacant position of Deputy Minister at the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. I wish both of these members well, and I know that they will fulfill their duties with the diligence and expectations required of them. Look forward to working with them as part of our team in the National Executive as we implement reforms and take South Africa to the next level. Obviously, these appointments have now been confirmed by the President, and we welcome both these members into their roles.
What happened, though, remains the question. Did John Steenhuisen and Dion George have a fallout? Well, Steenhuisen offered no explanations as to what actually happened. And neither did the minister in the presidency and cabinet's spokesperson, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni.
The position in COP, I'm sure you saw that Minister George last week, if not earlier this week, articulated a position in the international platform which was contrary to South Africa's position on a number of matters. So we need to solidify our position on the COP matters, but that's not part of the cabinet statement. I just needed to set the record straight that what he articulated was not a cabinet and the government position. The government position had not changed at that point.
The move, though, does suggest that Steenhuisen is putting his stamp of authority on his party in the same way he did in June by winning the battle to stay in the GNU and thereby keep the blue lights on against party federal chairperson Helen Zille and others who actually wanted the DA to pull out. The DA is supposed to hold party elections soon. The DA's senior partner in the GNU, meanwhile, is having problems of its own Over a week ago, it was revealed that Senzo Mchunu, that is the suspended police minister, had asked to be relieved of his ANC duties, but that Party Secretary General Fikile Mbalula had refused to grant him his wish. This week, it turned out the ANC's National Working Committee asked questions, and it was subsequently agreed that Mchunu should be relieved of his ANC duties, even though he was involved in, or he is, we should say, involved in ANC efforts to regain support in KwaZulu-Natal, a province the party lost in last year's poll. Mbalula, earlier this week, tried to explain what actually happened.
Paragraph 3.1.1 provides that, I quote, a member, office bearer, or public representative who has been indicted to appear in court of law on a charge of corruption or other serious crimes must immediately step aside pending the finalization of her or his case, close quote. Comrade Mchunu has not been indicted to appear in a court of law on a charge of corruption or other serious crimes. Accordingly, the specific provisions of paragraph 3.1.1 do not apply to him. Now, in the light of the Commission's work and what it requires on him, it is practically impossible not to agree to that particular request. That is what has guided the National Working Committee to then grant Comrade Senzo the request that he made, that he wished to step aside to be on special leave equally in terms of the party work and the work of the National Executive Committee, pending the processes that have been undertaken at the present moment, so that he's got no burden on himself or the ANC as we deal with these particular matters.
The ANC's ally, the South African Communist Party, is in the middle of its own storm, which could negatively affect or impact, rather, the 113-year-old former liberation movement and could spell the end of its decades-old alliance with the ANC. SACP General Secretary Solly Mapaela leads the charge in insisting on the implementation of a conference resolution allowing contesting elections on its own, which may further reduce the ANC's chances of recovering from the 40% it fell to in last year's national elections. Former SACP General Secretary and now party chairperson Blade Nzimande is leading a group that seeks to reverse the decision. Nzimande is also an ANC cabinet minister, which he was even when he was still the SACP's General Secretary. Mapaela runs the SACP full-time.
It is important for us to have that discussion so that the General Council of the ANC can get a full report and as well as a way forward from the National Executive Committee on this particular important development within the alliance. But most importantly, we need an alliance meeting as well to reflect on this moment before the National General Council so that as the alliance, we can have a common approach on this particular matter. But nonetheless, you will know what is the position of the ANC on the matter, that we are not in favor of the position of the party, standing it alone in terms of the upcoming elections.
Themba Mthembu is the secretary of the SACP in KwaZulu-Natal, and he joins us now to discuss this matter. Thank you very much, Mr. Mthembu, for agreeing to talk to us. Let's start first with something that happened or that was announced by the South African Communist Party a few weeks ago, which is that your provincial executive has now been disbanded and a task team will be put in place to run the affairs of the party in that province. Clarify to us your status or the status of your provincial executive.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thanks to the listeners of Newzroom. Yes, last week there was an announcement that we have been disbanded. Once we received that message from a briefing over Zoom from the General Secretary, we then requested them to put that decision in writing. So we are still waiting for the letter to that effect. Up to now, we haven't received the letter. So we cannot say, as we stand right now, we are disbanded because there have to be a letter to that effect. So it depends who you speak to. Others will say, yes, they are disbanded. Others say they have to be disbanded. They will be considered disbanded once they receive an official letter to that effect.
What were the reasons?
So as far as we are concerned,
yes,
we have written to the national leadership. If we haven't received the letter, it's business as usual.
Now, what were the reasons that you were given, the reasons you want written down? Because rumor has it that you were disbanded because you dared to oppose that decision, or you, at the very least, you asked for a review of that decision to contest, for the SACP to contest elections on its own.
That's another question which is very difficult to answer, because when we look at the reasons that have been forwarded so far, the first one was that we are being disbanded because we have defined ourselves outside the discipline of the party. Therefore, according to Article 6 of the Constitution of the South African Communist Party, it means that we have to be disbanded. We have violated that Article 6. And then there is another reason also that have been communicated, that we have been disbanded in line with 10.5 of the Constitution of the South African Communist Party, which is something very different. And then the other one, they said, after assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of our province with others, they decided that they have to disband the province so that they give a new structure and opportunity to rebuild the province up to the next Congress. So there are three reasons. And there have been also another reason that have been touted behind the scenes, that actually we are not trusted to implement the reason. So we don't know which is which. So we are waiting. That's why we wanted a written letter to know exactly what is the reason for disbandment.
Obviously disagree with all those reasons, yes or no?
We disagree with all of them.
Now, Fikile Mbalula says there needs to be an engagement. Blatant Zemande, your national chairperson, has written saying this must be reviewed. What's your position on what both of them have said in the past week?
In fact, the decision to contest the election stands. What is in dispute, in debate, is the modalities, is the how part. That is what have been a point of differences. For example, we are saying that the majority of our membership have got dual membership. What are we doing about a case where there is a dual membership? In fact, more than 90% of our members are members of the ANC, not only members of the ANC, leaders of the ANC. So what do we do about that? This is what we need to sit down with the ANC and trying to iron out so that there are no conflict on the ground. So that is what we have asked.
Mr. Temamtembu, let me thank you very much for your time. Thank you for clarifying these issues. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the listeners.
We don't know, of course, where that is going to end. To this now, President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's pleased with the cleaning that's underway in the city of Johannesburg ahead of the G20 Leaders Summit. He joined the CEO City Cleanup Partnership program on Friday.
Cleaning up the city one street at a time as part of urban renewal efforts. President Cyril Ramaphosa was at the Walter Sisulu Square in Kliptown as part of the CEO City Partnership to renew Johannesburg. As small businesses around the square prepared to open for the day, the city of Johannesburg was already hard at work ahead of the president's arrival. Pavements were repaired, streets were swept, and teams were assigned to various cleaning duties. It was a sight that impressed President Ramaphosa, who says the progress made in rejuvenating Johannesburg economic hubs is clear.
Working under the rubric of the Presidential Working Group, a great deal of work is now happening to restore Johannesburg to its former glory. And this is not the first time we've done this, to pick up a city and reposition it. We did this with Durban, and Durban is looking much, much better than it was a few years ago.
The president also assured South Africans that this is not a show for international guests or an effort to sweep local problems under the rug. He says the long-term goal is to attract investment, support businesses, and create jobs. He did get his hands a little dirty, planting a tree to symbolize that commitment.
This is not a flash in the pan. This is not a once-off process. It will continue even after the G20. And we should know that when cities around the world hold summits and big conferences, they revamp themselves, they spruce themselves up like we all do when we receive visitors in our homes. And when you know that a high-level person is coming to visit you, it could be your in-laws or whoever, you will make your home lookable. And that is exactly what we are doing.
Johannesburg Mayor Tata Morero, who hosted the president, says this work goes beyond the G20 preparations. It's about restoring the city for the people who live in it.
Don't worry about the G20. It will come and go. We'll continue with the work of reclaiming and rejuvenating the city of Johannesburg.
He says the private sector partnership is already giving the city new ideas, including ways to revive iconic but deteriorating buildings like Walter Sisulu Square, one of the first major tourism sites in a township.
Yesterday, they even advised us to say the way in which government is trying to deal with bad buildings, you will not be able to achieve results. And now they are part of an advisory team, the CEOs advising us on how to deal with bad buildings in the inner city.
The CEO of Jozi My Jozi, Bia Swanepoel, says this cleanup drive has been in motion since 2023, and the G20 simply helped speed things up.
The fact that we have the G20 as an activation point basically in our journey has been amazing to bring more people onto the process. But Josie, my Josie, and the process of restoring the city together with the city is going to continue long after the G20 has left.
She's calling on residents to join the efforts to help make Johannesburg a world-class city again.
We're actually trying to revive the city by doing it from the bottom up, by using the people on the ground, the unseen people, listening to their voices. What is it that the city needs to be able to turn around? And that's what we're running with. And yeah, so far we're doing incredibly well. We actually want to get the people to come back into Joburg. Babize bonke.
The G20 Leaders Summit begins on the 22nd of November at the Nasrec Expo Center. International visitors are already in Johannesburg, and many are stopping by sites like Walter Sisulu Square, a reminder of the work still ahead. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Dogozo Khumalo.